Okay, we've got to talk more about the alien bodies, or whatever they are. Some new information came across my desk, and it's amazing, and let's go over it. So get in here, this is Jack with Cosmic Road. I talk about UFOs and the paranormal. Please hit like, please subscribe, please share on social media, and let me know what you guys think in the comments below. And if you wanted to support Cosmic Road in a bigger way, please consider becoming a channel member. See the first link in the description below. Okay, yeah, we've got to talk about these guys. And by the way, did you know there was one that, well, first of all, it shows skin, which is amazing. And in fact, I think they all have skin, but here you can clearly see it. And this guy is interesting because he's actually in a sitting posture. And you can see how his limbs may have moved a little bit. You know, it's really intriguing, because we hear, you know, some reports saying they can't articulate. But then there's this one guy that does seem to be, you know, his limbs are in motion, and there's x-rays of him and all sorts of stuff. Anyway, but yeah, let's go to the scientific paper. Yeah, this is the Miles paper, written by Cliff Miles in 2022. And it's a very long paper, as you can see, written by a researcher who went over this stuff very thoroughly. And I will not going to read the whole thing. The paper was written by this guy, Cliff Miles, the CEO at Western Paleontological, if I can't say that name, Laboratories. He studied zoology and limnology, then business at BYU, went to Idaho Falls, and he lives in Utah. Okay, reading from the paper, the form of an animal's skeleton determines its function. Here we have a humanoid being with the mammal-like feature of a clavicle that looks very much like our own. Its basic body plan is like ours, with a head, shoulders, trunk, arms, and legs. You can see that it was bipedal and walked upright. These beings have a large elongated skull, large forward-facing eyes, no teeth, horizontal ribs that begin at dorsal 7, a single lower arm bone, a single lower leg bone, one bone in each wrist, and no ankle bones. The pelvic girdle is absent. Instead, they have a cloaca-like opening for the deposition of eggs. They have reptile-like skin and fingernails. The type specimen, a female, is 57.7 centimeters tall, just under 2 feet. The fact that these beings are here with flesh and bones preserved implies that their ancestors should be in the fossil record. The fact that they are not in the fossil record implies that they did not originate on Earth. As a career paleontologist, I have seen nothing in the fossil record that has the remote possibility of being an ancestor. Here we go. It's describing the history of the discovery, and then it gets into the DNA. These beings have unique DNA. The genetic studies performed on the seated individual in one of the loose skulls does not coincide with any of the known living creatures on Earth. It goes on to talk about the results of the DNA more. There's a Canadian lab that analyzed it, and they concluded the computerized analysis of the data showed the DNA does not coincide with any human being or living organism. The specimens are an unknown species. Now, I'm a little confused because apparently there was some human DNA retrieved from one of the skulls. It was badly degraded, but it did appear to be human. So he's saying something different. Okay, here he talks about the medical implant. Let's see what he has to say. The metal plate in her chest. In the case of Josephina, I came to the conclusion independently that hers was to stabilize her broken and healed clavicle. This implies a sophisticated knowledge of medical treatment. Is it possible that its unique shape and structure could in some way create a resonance that aided in healing? Only further study will give the answers. Well, that's an interesting idea. Resonance does seem to play an important part in a lot of this, according to the research I've done. The most fascinating part of their skulls is that they have a predentary and premaxilla that has taken the place of the teeth and lower jaw for mastication. In the lateral views of their skulls, you can clearly see a hinge space for both the predentary and the premaxilla. More visible in the CT scans is the fact that together they make up premaxillary and predentary plates that allow for a little bit of nipping. This implies a soft or liquid diet. As far as I know, this arrangement would be unique among the terrestrial vertebrates of our Earth. We can only guess as to their dietary specialization. And, that really makes me wonder how they could be hoaxes or fabricated, and have such consistency between them, and who will go to the trouble of doing that? Now, if they were ancient religious artifacts, then maybe, but I'm still, that doesn't quite ring true to me. When viewed from the front, the face and skull of this specimen is nearly round and resembles our own hominid lineage. It is 7 centimeters wide and 8 centimeters tall. Her skull is large in proportion to ours at 12 centimeters. It is posteriorly elongated. I said that right. From the side, you can see that her face, the anterior portion of the skull, is flat. There is a large pronounced prefrontal ridge. This being lacks what in humans would be a glabella, the smooth area above the nose and between the eyebrows. Instead, she has a nasal ridge that divides the skull in half. She has a paired cavity in the occipital region, which is reduced in the adults. The occipital sinus is not visualized in the CT scans. The absence of sinuses may be due to the absence of the need to heat the air. And here's a nice image giving all the various aspects of the skull's physiology. Check that out. Now, as to whether these beings could walk or not, or whether they needed to float or fly, he has this to say. It was reported to Linda Moulton Howe by one of her anonymous informants that some alien species preferred to float rather than walk. They have also reported to float into people's bedrooms. Yeah, sometimes they even go through the walls. They just go through the walls. If this indeed is the case, they would require a highly developed vestibular system. This might explain the complexities of the lateral sides of the skull. So is less bone necessary for increased sensory perception? A being would need a highly developed sensory system in order to create the sense of balance and spatial orientation for flotation movement. Speculation, I know, but until someone comes up with a better explanation, I am going to go with it. I have no problem being wrong. Okay, I like that confidence. Paper goes on talking about mastication, the interior of the skull, and a lot of really juicy details that I will let you read at your leisure. I know you don't want to see me reading a scientific paper, so I will allow you to dive into this on your own time, but it is really fascinating stuff, really amazing examination of these very unique specimens. Here's a layout of their spines. 2 formations merge with the spinal cord. Here's a female, and here's a male. Teardrop-shaped neural spines. Check this out. One of them was attacked by a jaguar. 2 sets of wounds. The first wound is between the... I'm not going to say those words. Given these facts, it can be assumed that the injuries were caused by an animal with canine teeth, such as a jaguar. And here is the broken clavicle that the implant may have been put in to correct for. About the eggs, the holotype female has 3 eggs preserved within her pelvic cavity. Each is a different size. I don't think it is a preservation issue related to death and burial. The eggs look complete and uncrushed. They have the following measurements. The density of the eggs is X, which is denser than the cortical plate of bones and calcinites. The density of oxalates and kidney stones is no more than X. I'm just using X as a placeholder. The tissues of the organs surrounding the eggs have a tight contact with them in some places, which can indicate elementation of these formations and gradual development. Dr. Dimitri determined that the eggs contain embryos. Using CT scans to change the structural density of the tissues, removing and rotating the image, we come to the contents of the eggs. This is interpreted as an egg with an embryo of 8 weeks. we can only guess as to their reproductive patterns. Cliff Miles also responded to some questions on Reddit, and this was really interesting. He talks about, well, first of all, he talks about how the beings have skin, no seams, no scars, no way to create a fake of any kind. She is sound, talking about the being known as Josephinus. If there is a scar, it is under her medical device that is on her chest. She has had her clavicles operated on with the medical portion of them being removed. But what's really interesting is he goes into some detail about the mummification process and how their brains are removed, but at the same time on the CT scans, the brains are showing that they're still there. It's kind of confusing, honestly. But he does go into a lot of detail about the mummification process. I hadn't thought they were mummified. I thought we were calling them mummies, but they were, you know, I had heard that they weren't actually mummies. They were just kind of petrified bodies left in a dry environment. But actually, according to this post, they did indeed go through a mummification process. Fabric wrappings were used as well. We recovered strands of cotton from inside and outside of the loose skulls. I personally discovered that one of the 7 skulls clearly has the remains of the fabric wrapping impressions on the outside of the skull. I am currently of the opinion that the fabric was used to hold the metal implants in place during the process of their mummification ritual. We cut open one of the skulls in order to collect bone samples. The interior of the skull was clean enough inside that I could clearly see the coronal suture. I was very happy about this because my visual inspection of the interior of the skull confirmed what I had described using the CT scans that I had. In the complete bodies, the scans showed that their brains remain. Isn't that weird? But their bodies were subjected to at least 2 applications of dipping in order to better preserve the bodies. The first consists of some kind of resin. I could smell it when my son, who's also a paleontologist, was cutting open the skull that we decided to use to take samples from. And it goes on talking about drip lines and the second application, etc. of the mummification process. But it appears that these bodies did go through a mummification process. So my question is, who did that mummification process? Was it their fellow beings? Or was it possibly the local Peruvians who maybe venerated them as gods? Or, you know, we don't know. Maybe they're mascots. We have no clue what these beings were to the local peoples, but I would imagine they would be venerated, and certainly they went through some sort of mummification process, according to this post, which I find very fascinating. To me, if that's true, that rules out a hoax or a relic, for religious purposes made 1,000 years ago, because I don't think that you would mummify a relic. So who were these guys? Well, I don't know, but here is a possible suggested answer. So let's take a listen.
Ancient race of Mayan dwarves used to live in Central America. I took a boat ride on the Mexican and Guatemalan border to find out. My guide and I hiked through the Mayan ruins of Yaxchilan while howler monkeys screamed in the canopy above. At one of the ruins, he pointed out a carving of 2 small people that he said were real and very powerful. He explained that they were spiritual beings connected to the dark world.
The small people. The dwarves look like supernatural.
Further to the east at the Mayan site of Uxmal is the legend of the Dwarf King. The legend goes like this. A local witch found a large egg that she took home with her. Eventually a small little person hatched out of this egg and she raised him. The dwarf learned to play the flute and started to play it very loudly. There was a prophecy that predicted the end of the king's reign once the song of this instrument could be heard throughout the land. The king heard about this flute player and challenged the dwarf to several contests. The last challenge was for the king and the dwarf to both smash cocoil seeds over their heads until one triumphed over the other. The dwarf had an exceptionally hard head and withstood each blow. When it was the king's turn, he died, and the dwarf became the new king of Uxmal. Did an ancient race of Mayan dwarves used to live in...
So there you go. That has a lot of commonalities, right? Or at least a few. These small beings coming out of an egg, potentially ruling over the locals. So what do you think, guys? Are these beings the dwarf kings of ancient mythology? Or are they something entirely different? I would love to know your thoughts about all this in the comments below. Are you still not buying it? Are you still thinking they're all fakes and hoaxes? I have not made up my mind on all of this, but Based on what I've seen, I'm definitely leaning toward these being authentically anomalous specimens of one sort or another. But, my mind is totally open, and I will see where the evidence takes us. But let me know your thoughts about all this in the comments below. And if you've enjoyed this video, give me a big thumbs up. I sure appreciate it. Smash the subscribe button and the bell to be notified of future videos. You don't want to miss a thing. Join me on social media. There's Facebook and Twitter links below. I would love to see you guys there. If you wanted to support Cosmic Road in a bigger way, please consider becoming a channel member. Channel members are rock stars, and I really appreciate you guys' support. Thank you so much. Meanwhile, there's plenty of other videos to check out on the channel, and I'll see you next time. This is Jack with Cosmic Road, signing out.